Alright, what's going on today, guys? In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at my takes for the top 5 Battle Mage weapons in Elden Ring. All these weapons make excellent pairings to your mage build, meaning that intelligence is your primary damage stat, so they pair excellent with caster builds. To give you guys an idea what kind of damage scaling we're looking at in the video with the bosses, they're all scaled to New Game Plus 5. But with all that out of the way, let's get things started with the number 5 spot. Kicking things off at the number 5 spot, we're going to be taking a look at the Royal Greatsword. You guys can acquire this weapon from killing Blythe after you complete Ronnie's questline. You go back to her tower and he's going to go a little bit crazy on you. So he'll attack you, and after you defeat him, he will drop this weapon and his armor set for you. And I'll just go ahead and get this out of the way right now. I did want to rank this weapon just a wee bit higher, but it secured the number 5 spot for 2 primary reasons. One, it does have a heavy stat requirement across the board with strength, so we're not really using a whole lot of strength with the mage builds. And 2, that Wolf's Assault comes out really slow. It's an excellent Ash of War, and it has some really crazy damage potential, but with hyper-aggressive endgame bosses like Malekith, your openings for the Ash are few and far between, and the Ash of War is really what makes this weapon shine in the damage output. Another reason why is it does come with the Colossal Sword moveset. I know this might be a hot take, but I'm not really a big fan of it. Personally, I do prefer the Greatsword moveset. I know that it gets the great crouch poke or the rolling into poke, but other than that, I'm just not too familiar with this weapon, so I guess it's kind of biased. But regardless, I suppose that's enough meat dogging on the weapon. Let's get into ways how we can make this build really come together. We're talking things like Magic Scorpion, Charm, or Shard of Alexander to buff the Ash of War and some really good damage potential. Throw that magic tier into your physic as well to boost magic damage some really crazy levels. Pumping it like any other weapon on this list. This weapon does come with inherent frost buildup as well, so if you land enough Wolf's Assault, you can proc the frostbite, just increasing your damage output to your enemies to some really crazy levels. I wish that Frost got the love that it deserves compared to Bleed, so buffing Talisman, something similar to like Lord of Blood's Exaltation maybe in the DLC. But until then, I guess we'll have to do nothing but wait. With all that being said, I think that the Royal Greatsword is an excellent weapon with perhaps one of the coolest Ash Awards in the entire game. You guys should definitely ignore everything I said at the beginning of the fight with this weapon, just dogging on it. It's definitely worth taking a look at. But that's going to be the Royal Greatsword at number 5. Let's keep things moving with the number 4 spot. Sliding into the number 4 spot, we're going to be taking a look at Wing of Estelle and also its Ash of War Nebula, which is the main focus of this weapon. This is an excellent weapon against larger bosses because you can cast the Nebula in their openings, and we saw with Radon there that we did a quarter of his health bar with just one cast. So I would not recommend using this weapon against faster bosses or smaller bosses because we're going to want to connect as much to the Nebula as possible. And I unfortunately don't demonstrate it in this fight specifically, but the Nebula does have excellent poise break potential. As long as all the things connect, that it'll really break the enemy's poise. Radon does have a kind of higher poise compared to most bosses. Also, aside from the Nebula, the Wing of Estelle does have its charge R2 attack, which shoots out a couple beams of light with no cost to your FP whatsoever. So anything with range magic that does not cost FP can be really useful in certain situations. All that being said, though, I do believe that Wing of Estelle might be the singular best weapon on this list for an offhand weapon for your mage build, just because it has the lowest stat requirements of any of the other ones on this list, so you can focus on the only damage stat that matters for mage builds, that being int, of course. That's going to be Wing of Estelle at number 4. Let's go ahead and move into the number 3 spot. Keeping things moving at the number 3 spot, we're going to be taking a look at Sword Knight in Flame. You guys can acquire this weapon from Deep in Carrier Manor on a chest in the ground about midway through the Legacy dungeon. Now this weapon's kind of a weird one compared to the rest of the weapons on this list because it's really the only weapon that's received any nerfs. It's definitely not the monster that it was on release, but the damage is still definitely there. And I think a lot of people just kind of forget this weapon even exists anymore, to be honest with you guys, because I very rarely see anyone using it. Getting into the weapon itself, we'll take a look at its 2 primary damage types. First one being the Flame Stance, which scales only with Faith, so if you're running like a Faith Mage hybrid, you can pump a little bit of extra Faith just to do a little bit more damage with the flames. Second one being my preferred one is the Knight Stance, or the Comet Azure Stance as I like to call it, scaling only with int, and we're talking int-based weapons today, so it goes perfectly. The best thing about the Comet Azure Stance is it creates distance between yourself and the boss, firing off those beams from a safe distance, just worrying about their range attacks, such as Morgoth's arrow that we saw right there. But as long as you telegraph the boss's attacks, this thing comes out really quick, and you can kind of melt them before they can do anything about it. All in all, I think Sword of Knight in Flame is an excellent weapon, and I would highly recommend you guys take a look at this one. That's going to wrap it up for Sonaf. Let's go ahead and move things forward with the number 2 spot. Coming in at the number 2 spot, we're going to be taking a look at the Darkmoon Greatsword. As we all know by now, you can acquire this weapon by completing Ronnie's questline. It may be the longest quest in the entire game, but the reward is definitely worth it because this weapon is excellent in pretty much every situation, providing ranged options with the Moonlight Greatsword attack and also providing cross buildup as well. Another great thing about this weapon, no pun intended, that it does come with the standard Greatsword moveset. Being one of the best in the entire game, I just think it's the most well-rounded, easy-to-learn moveset that there is. Getting back to the Moonlight Greatsword side of things, this thing is super buffable, so we're talking things like Magic Scorpion Charms, Shard of Alexander. You can buff it with the Physic as well using your Magic Scouting tier. With any other weapon on this list, we're going to be pumping the end to increase this thing's damage to its maximum potential. People have told me in the past that the Charge Attack Talisman and the Charge Attack Physic actually buff this thing's damage, but I'm pretty sure that's not true because I did test this on the Albinaurics in Moglin Palace before I showed this footage, and it didn't seem like the damage was there. If you guys disagree, make sure to let me know in the comments otherwise. The best thing about this weapon just has to be how long the Ash of War lasts and also how little FP it costs to acquire it, lasting almost a minute. And even when you do reapply it, it doesn't take any time whatsoever, it just comes out really quickly. If you guys want it to last even longer, you can run things like Old Lord's Talisman to extend the buff duration, but I don't see any necessary reason to run a talisman slot for it, but that's just me. It is definitely safe to say that this weapon earns its spot in the game as one of the 9 legendary weapons, and also being just a legendary weapon in this community in general. You guys all know that by now. This one specifically being maybe the best iteration of any of the Moonlight Swords we've seen in any of the Souls games. Obviously, per usual, if you guys disagree with that, make sure to let me know in the comments. This weapon just brings anything to the table for pretty much any boss in the game. Whether it's fast or slow, it doesn't matter. Just keeping yourself at a safe distance at all times with the Moonlight Greatsword Ash and dealing out some serious damage at the same time. It's just an excellent weapon for any occasion. All in all, I do firmly believe that you guys should take some time and do Ronnie's quest to acquire this weapon at some point in one of your playthroughs. I'm sure most of us have it by now, but to the newer players that don't, I guarantee you, I know Ronnie's quest can be kind of a pain. There's plenty of guides out there on how to do it, and just doing the quest in itself, just for this weapon specifically, it is definitely worth your time. I have no doubt saying that whatsoever. But with all that being said, that's going to be the Darkmoon Greatsword at number 2. Unfortunately, I do believe that there is one more weapon that is actually better than this one, and we're about to see what exactly that one is. That's going to wrap up the Darkmoon Greatsword at number 2. Let's get this thing wrapped up with the number 1 spot. Wrapping things up at number 1, of course, we'll be taking a look at Death's Poker. You guys can acquire this weapon from a Deathrite bird in the southeast side of Caelid at night, just a little bit north of where you teleport to fight Radahn. Why this weapon solidifies itself at number 1 over DMG, let me explain real quick. I do believe that it has better damage over time and better frost buildup than DMG does. While DMG has excellent burst options with its range attack, the ghost trail that Death's Pokers leave is not even remotely comparable. With pretty much all bosses, they're just going to go ahead and scan in the ghost trail. They don't input read it very well. The Apostles and Melania are really the only ones that do. I always like to feature Moog with this weapon because this is one of the very few weapons that can go ahead and one-cycle him, doing some excellent damage before he can even phase transition. And I guarantee you there's absolutely no world whatsoever that DMG would be capable of this kind of damage. Death's Poker is just the most reliable in option, and it definitely just goes excellently well with your mage build because it has relatively low stat requirements all around. Well, with all that being said, that's going to go ahead and take care of today's video. As always, I appreciate you guys coming out, and if you made it this far in the video, maybe consider leaving a like on the video or hitting the subscribe button for more Elden Ring content. I'll make sure to see you guys soon. Have a good rest of your night. Thanks.